Hello and welcome back to SumerDaily, everyone. We just got done with Monday Night Football, and so we have a very special guest joining us, Shawn Syed, scheme pioneer, host of the Stats and Scheme podcast. Shawn, how you doing, brother?
Sam, we talk all the time. This is the first time I get to come on Sumer Daily, so it really does feel like an honor. We choose the Monday night game, the Giants Steelers. We don't just do like a conversation about our Uncrustables rankings. Maybe we miss an opportunity, but nonetheless, still a fun game to talk about.
No, certainly a fun game. And, Uncrustables are a staple in the locker room scene. I personally am an old school PB&J guy. I heard you recently discovered some new flavors. You want to, as we get into a new segment, haters and appreciators, tell us what you hate and appreciate about the Uncrustables, dude.
Look, the PB&J, the original grape, that is the classic. I think that's the right move. You have a hazelnut where it's just like, hey, you're having Nutella and bread. That is a different category. Now, I personally, when I was playing, it was definitely an orange slices in the locker room kind of guy. But who am I to criticize a person's choice of Uncrustable sandwich?
Yeah, that's how it is. But sometimes in football, you gotta love stuff and you gotta criticize stuff. And that's why we love this game. And so me and Shawn have a special new segment for you, haters and appreciators. This is where we highlight, what we didn't love about this game. And it wasn't the most primo game, as you alluded to, of all time, Shawn. Two offenses that kind of struggled throughout the game, but we also appreciated some stuff. So let's kind of start off on the wrong side of center here. Let's start off with some of the things we didn't really love. Number one, just a technicality, the catch rule. Tell us what you saw there.
Sam, we have an example of George Pickens catching the ball in the end zone. You get 1 foot down, you double tap that foot, but the two tap is not as good as if you get your right and your left in. To me, absolute shenanigans there. We got to let these guys get more catches. That's frustrating. You have the rule where if you catch it, you get a knee down. That can count as 2 feet. So, the catch rule, it's always something that's frustrating. It feels like now, a few times a year, we're discovering something new about it. But I don't know, Sam. I don't know if you agree, but I feel like if you get the double tap in with the same foot, it's got to count as 2 feet.
Look, I feel like we learned something about this catch rule earlier on in the season, that the front of the toe only matters going forward, but the back of the heel actually does not matter. That actually still counts. And so if the back of the heel goes out, that's not a catch. Today we learned what else was not a catch. I don't think have you ever seen a double tap of the same foot, Shawn?
I feel like I have seen it once or twice. It's like obviously not memorable enough, but I'm glad you mentioned the kind of front half of the toe, back half of the toe. And then it's like, well, now we get examples because players are so good at really staying on their toes when they're running, where it's like, it looks like they're going out of bounds, but the back of their cleat is going up. So it's just so funny that in this beautiful, ugly game that we're talking about, literally the most minuscule things like people's cleats and kind of where they are in relation to the end zone.
Right, exactly. And the reason why this is something special that we kind of have to talk about is because the quality of the red zone offensive execution was just not there, particularly in the first half, Shawn. And so this is something that me and you, when we're analyzing things and breaking down things in real time and, after the game, we really hone in on. We love our guy, Ben Johnson up there with the Lions, who's absolutely been cooking in the red zone. That was not what we saw in the Giants Steelers game today. What were the things that you thought could have been improved upon in the red zone?
You mentioned Ben Johnson. When I look at some of their red zone in week 2 for the Lions, they were like 1 for 7, and then they go on this tear where they're 16 for their last 18. And it feels like they combine creativity within their base offense. So you're having these motions, these really specialty plays that are just tied to other things. But in this game, you get into the red zone, it feels like, hey, it's not that it's necessarily base offense, but in the red zone, if you have a player that is a special player, you can say, well, let's lean into this matchup a lot, where, of course, the 49ers will love to do that with Christian McCaffrey when he gets back. But, in this game, it just feels like you don't have a ton of that. So it felt a little bit like things were just really, stagnant there, where maybe then you just have to, I don't know, you get Daniel Jones on some creative design runs, I guess. I know how much you love quarterback design runs, but it overall just felt like a little bit of a, stick in the mud kind of situation for really both teams in the red zone.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. One of the things that, we don't always agree upon is I'm such a big mobile quarterback guy. And in theory, we had 2 mobile quarterbacks. Obviously, Russ Wilson is getting up there in age, but you have Justin Fields sitting there on the bench. He's taking snaps. He's taken red zone runs this year. Maybe you get him in and do something interesting. There just was a lack of creativity. I think you highlighted it really well. And moving forward into something that was abundantly creative and perhaps too creative on the 2-point play. We catch a swinging gate where there's poor communication between the Giants. The linemen aren't looking at the snap goes off. What are your kind of thoughts on that and your more general thoughts about how to approach that situation in terms of a key 2-point play?
I have no problem with the initial approach where it's like, hey, look, you have numbers to that side. You look like you're, a high school team running that swinging gate kind of extra point. But obviously, I'm sure that they obviously practice it, right? It's not like they just drew this up on the sideline, but you have the snap timing kind of off with everyone on the side, and it just becomes like an all-time bad vibes 2-point conversion where you're looking at it and it's like, oh man, like this probably worked in practice, this probably worked in walkthrough, and just a really, really unfortunate situation there where, in the end, it doesn't totally come back to bite them. I think you make that move to just get more information there to see if you have to go for 2 again later, but just a rough one when you look back at that one on film.
Yeah, and the thing is, obviously the film hasn't come up yet, and we're going to have to do a deeper dive analysis. But it looked like they might have had the numbers out there. Like even if they just make contact with the guys out there, it looked like it was a lineman, maybe a DB there out there too. You got Malik Neighbors, an elite playmaker, who when he has the ball in his hands, who knows what can happen. Break a tackle, get it to momentum, which has become a controversial thing in the past week, but build a little bit of momentum or at least a little bit of confidence there. But enough of the stuff that we didn't like, Shawn, because we're not player haters out here. We're appreciators. We are optimistic guys who love the game of football. And we got an absolute masterclass for almost the entirety of the game of one of my favorite players. And I love hand placement and hand fighting and the ability to really push offensive linemen around. And Dexter Lawrence was the guy who was doing that from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. What were your thoughts on Dex today?
Sam, I mean, we got Dexter Lawrence looking like he is throwing humans around like it's a WWE ring out there. He is really, really so powerful, but at the same time, so agile, so quick. His technique is fantastic, where he knows exactly where his hands need to be. He understands the leverage of the center. He understands the leverage of the guard. He knows how to get to those weak spots and really just move that human being out of the way. So just a fantastic performance where I'm fine saying that he was the best player on the football field really the entire game, even in a losing effort. It feels like, you hand out an MVP award to even a player on a losing side here where you can just build so much around the defense when you have just kind of like the best defensive tackle in the entire league.
Right. And for 3 quarters, Shawn, it felt like he was going to win the game by himself somehow. Now, the stars on the other side came out. TJ Watt had a couple big plays, particularly one to kind of seal the deal for the Steelers. But he's playing like a defensive player of the year candidate. And he's playing the 0 and the 1 and just causing immense amount of pressure against his opponents. And it's really fantastic to see him do that. Maybe it is, a pathway to more people trying to invest in players like this, but he has such a unique skill set, as you highlighted. It's really fun to watch. So from one of the players who is one of the more, established, known great players in the league to a guy who kind of had his breakout game today, unfortunately got hurt at the very end, but 20 carries, 145 yards and a touchdown for Tyrone Tracy. And he's a very unique guy, right, Shawn?
Yeah, he is such a cool story where you transfer from Iowa to Purdue, you switch positions, you go from receiver to running back. Sam, that just feels like something that we're going to hear that on the broadcast for the rest of his career. It is just such a beautiful anecdote, but it's interesting that I guess he's just the RB1 there now, where Devin Singletary plays a few snaps there, but they really lean into Tracy. Obviously, you're going to have to see kind of what the injury status is there, but certainly a bright spot for that Giants team in an otherwise kind of muddy loss.
Yeah, and speaking of these kind of special tweener guys, I got to highlight my guy, Calvin Austin. Calvin Austin, a Memphis product. He was a walk-on type guy, a track guy, then all of a sudden one of the best wide receivers in college. I loved watching him. I hated playing against him. He was absolutely electric. He had a game today, Shawn.
Sam, I mean, he comes in, he almost doubles his career touchdowns. He goes from, I'm pretty sure it's 3 regular season touchdowns to now 5 regular season touchdowns. And I love when you have a player that is able to produce on special teams and then be part of just your regular offense, where now it feels like they are really leaning into the Russ deep ball offense. And, I think you can survive, I guess, with that, where you're really trying to run, throw it deep on the outside. And if you have Russ where He's going to be a high ADOT guy now. You're going to roll the dice. You're going to hope for a high completion percentage over expected. Yeah, I feel like you get enough electric guys going down the field, and you can get things rolling.
Yeah, and considering they were struggling a little bit with Dexter Lawrence, it was interesting to see them move into kind of almost a no huddle, muddle huddle type situation with a high ADOT to kind of get, the defensive line that includes guys like Brian Burns off of Russ's back. For most of the game, he was, back to dink and duck Russ. And when they were able to mix in a little play action, get it deep, and kind of get that D line tired, they were really successful. And speaking of a pass rush that was successful, towards the end of the game, the Steelers D line took over. What are your thoughts on the mix about, Highsmith and Watt now going forth into the rest of the season?
It's a top D-line unit in the league. And even with Cam Hayward there, they're able to do so much. And I think about all these teams as the trade deadline comes up and this team could use a defensive end. This team could use a defensive end. You know who doesn't need a defensive end? The Pittsburgh Steelers. And they continue to show it week after week, where of course the Giants, they are banged up at that left tackle spot. Their tackles in general aren't going to be the top tackles in the league by any means, but the Steelers can get a lead with their defensive line. They can shut the door with their defensive line. And when I start to think about this team for the rest of the season, it's certainly led by the defense, but when you're that good up front, it can cause issues in the run game. It can cause issues in the pass game, and it can really just destroy a game plan as a whole.
Yeah, and I liked how for the Giants, the game kind of unspooled for their offense as the game went on. And that's really the sign of a great defensive line and great players such as TJ Watt, is that maybe at the beginning of the game plan, script, you can kind of get on their good side and kind of keep them off the quarterback. But as the game goes, it's just very difficult to beat those kind of guys. We saw that with Nicky Bosa, obviously, last night on Sunday Night Football as well. And so you kind of gave us the outlook for the Steelers moving forward. A little tougher schedule. Their division just got interesting now that Jameis Winston is the quarterback for the Browns. Now the Giants obviously are really struggling. Their defense looked pretty good for a while. Now they struggled against the run a little bit today, gave up a couple big passes. What are your thoughts on where the Giants should go from here?
The Giants, unfortunately, you start to look at them and think, are they sellers at the trade deadline? Where, of course, I think every team wants to feel like, hey, we're competing, we're going to continue to do things. But when you start to think of teams that, maybe want a receiver, you keep on seeing Slayton just producing there really year over year. I feel like at random points where it gets you encouraged about what he could maybe be somewhere else. You look at, I don't know, do they feel like their defensive line is deep in New York and they want to maybe move BJ Ojolari or something like that? And it just feels like a situation where you're trying to build for the future, I suppose. Are you trying to find out more about Daniel Jones? Do you even need to find out more about Daniel Jones? I feel like maybe we have an answer there, but just trying to build some positive momentum kind of moving forward. Of course, you have the entire second half of the season. So it's not like you're just tanking the entire year, but got to start doing something, whether it's, accruing draft capital or something to move forward.
Right, definitely. And you talked about the trade deadline. And Shawn, both me and you are going to show up tomorrow on the Sumer Sports Show with Thomas Dimitroff and Lindsey Rhodes, two absolute legends in the industry. And we're really excited to talk about the trade deadline. You want to give us any sneak peeks of things that you think are interesting moving into this trade deadline?
I was going through the Eagles film today. I feel like maybe they could use a pass rusher too, where I was looking at all the teams that, Sam, there's so many teams that could use a pass rusher, but looking at the Eagles where their defense has actually really been, I think they've been tuning it up a little bit and finding a lot of success. I still want to see a little bit more juice from those edge rushers where you had Nolan Smith have some success. Bryce Huff and Josh Sweat have been getting things going, but you have Howie Roseman there. You're always going to see him. I'm sure he's going to make tons of calls. I would be excited to see them add someone there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's a very similar situation for the Ravens, but we'll break all that down tomorrow. Make sure you tune in to the Sumer Sports Show. Shawn, thank you for joining me late night. Sometimes I'm just grinding late after these games all by myself, and it's great to have a partner in this tonight. Any last words from you, sir?
Sam, maybe we just we'll do the continued Uncrustables breakdown offline. Feels like we still have a lot to learn about the Steelers. Feels like we have a lot to learn about Uncrustable sandwiches.
Certainly. And so from your Uncrustables Kings, Shawn, Syed, Sam Bruchhaus for Sumer Sports, thank you for listening and have a good night.